Hey everyone, this is a quick video showing how to get started with unit testing for WordPress, and let's get started. So first of all, unit testing for WordPress themes and plugins, why is it important? It's important when you work on some big project or some serious plugin that is, for example, in repository and you're working with a team and you have so many users and features, and then when the plugin grows and become basically bigger, there is a chance that something can break. Someone in your team can break something when adding a new feature or refactoring or fixing something. So unit testing helps you to prevent this before shipping this to your end users. And so the goal for this video, basically, what I'm going to show you is that how to use wp-env. This is a tool created like a package from WordPress official package that helps you to quickly run tests for your plugin or your theme without complicated setup. So first, before we get started, make sure that you have Node.js installed, you have Node.js, npm, you have Composer installed, and then you have Docker desktop also installed. So I am using Windows here. As you can see here, I have installed Docker desktop. It's running, it's open right now. This is important because wp-env basically creates a containers, like Docker containers. It creates two separate environments, one for development environment, and the second is testing environment. So whenever you run your tests, you will be running them inside of your testing environment. And I'll show you how to get started. And additionally, I have a guide here that I created here in my Notion, that explains basically everything. But it's pretty simple, so I'm sure that you can understand everything even without this guide. So first of all, make sure to install WordPress wp-env, WordPress/env. The name of command is wp-env. The name of the package is @WordPress/env. Make sure to install this. So in their official documentation, they show here that basically you need to install it globally. So that's what I'm also doing here. So just run this command in your terminal, and it will install WordPress wp-env on your machine. So this will allow you to run commands like this one on your machine. Then, as I mentioned earlier, make sure that Docker installed and running, Docker desktop, and then Node.js and Composer also must be installed. So once all these tools are installed, next, what you should do is navigate to your plugin. So in my case, I will be using an example of my own structure plugin. Here I have already some tests, but I'm going to explain you basically the setup. So once you are inside in your plugin directory in your terminal, what you're going to do is to run this command, wp-env start. And it will basically create isolated containers, Docker containers with your WordPress, with WordPress installation, with your plugin installed inside. And let's just run this command. So since my Docker is open here, I will open it. As you can see, it's now starting all the containers. For you, it can be longer because first it needs to pull all the images, but I'm not going to show you this part because it's just basically you have to wait while it will pull all the images. And once your container is started, you will see these URLs here printed. So your development environment will be on this URL, and your test environment will run on this URL. And these are your database ports, basically. And if you open your desktop client, also your Docker desktop, you can also see it spins these 6 containers. It's basically like a database and CLI and development environment and test environment. So all spin for you. Another thing is that wp-env has this configuration file. Here it's also explained in my guide. So if you don't have it, just create this file .wp-env.json, and this is like a main config of your wp-env. And here you can specify what PHP version, what plugin. So in this case, it shows period. So it means that it's basically, it will run from the root. And then these are ports. I think these are default, actually, I'm not sure. But you can specify them like this if you want. So and now our environment is running. So let's try to open our localhost, localhost 8888. In my browser. Let me just open my browser, open it, and it should open my development installation, my WordPress development installation. So let's see, everything looks like everything is running. In your desktop here, you should see everything should be green. Okay, and now let me just wait a few seconds. Okay, it's opening. So now this is running inside in my Docker. You can go to admin. Also, the username is admin and password is password. So you can navigate to your dashboard. You can see that everything. So it's a complete working WordPress installation. So next, let's proceed with next step, which is installing. We need to install PHP Unit, PHP Unit package, and then we need to install, let me check it right here, package, our package.json, okay, and our composer.json, okay. So what you need is these packages. So to install them, basically it's composer require, here in my docs, you will also find it here. Composer require --dev, and then these are the packages. First is WP coding standards. This is a basically coding standards, and then we have PHP Unit, and then PHP Unit polyfills. So these are the most important. So make sure to install them in your composer, and you are good to go. So next thing is that once this installed, what we need is actually a configuration for our PHP Unit and our actual tests, right? So for this, what you can use is WordPress has this tool, this command, CLI command called scaffold plugin tests. And what this does is basically it's bootstrapping these files for you. So from your terminal, you can run this. If you have your CLI installed on your machine, your WP CLI, or as mentioned in my docs here, you can run it under the inside actually your wp-env container, right? So, and this is how you're gonna run it with this command. So let me just copy it, paste, and let me explain. So it's npx wp-env run CLI wp scaffold plugin tests, and then name of your plugin. So in my case, it's a plugin name structure. So I would just type it here. And what it will do, it will scaffold and create these files for you, PHP Unit, XML.dist. This is a configuration for our tests. And then it will create tests folder with this bootstrap file, which is important also for running tests. And then it will create some test sample that with generic default tests like this one. So this is very useful. You can just run this command to scaffold to bootstrap basically all these files. And once we're done with this, what we are going to do next is we can start running our tests. But first, let's open our PHP unit config and let's see what we have here. So here, this is where you define basically all the options, configuration option to run against your plugin. It specifies from which directory, so by default it tests /bootstrap, and then here it mentions also, it specifies under what directory it will run, and then files needs to be prefixed with test hyphen. So as you can see, all my tests are starting with test hyphen. And then to run these tests, what we need is another command. So let me just open this, and it's not actually here. Yeah, I'm gonna add it here later, but I just added it in my package.json. So you are gonna need to run this command right here. wp-env run tests-cli. This is our container basically for our tests. And then this flag is pointing where your plugin located. So in my case, it's plugin structure. And then this is an actual command to run PHP unit with a configuration. So if you add it in your package.json, in your scripts, you can run it with this command. It's like a shortcut basically. So if I will run npm run test integration, it will just it will run basically this command right here. And yeah, let's try to run it. Let's see what will happen. So once I run this command, so as you can see, it's starting everything. Your container should be running already because it will run inside in this container. And it's basically starting our tests. It's pointing to our config file. It's reading these test files right here. And it's starting to run tests. By default, you will have no tests here. You will have sample tests. So if you will run something, it will show 0 tests here because test sample is ignored by default. So if you go here in our config, you can see that it's excluded. So what we need to do next is basically start creating our tests. So first we will start with very, very simple basic test. So this test is basically super generic, just checking that this function exists. And this is the function that defined in my plugin. And this test here is basically asserts that this function exists and it returns true. And then it also checks that this action loaded, right? So if I run this test, it should output true. It should show green here. But if something goes wrong, if my function maybe doesn't exist or it's renamed, it will return false. So let's try to open my plugin, structure fs. It's actually located inside in my Bootstrap, I think. Let me just scroll up. Yeah, so this is the function right here. So if I'm gonna just try to rename it right here, and let's try to run this test once again. Let's see what will happen this time. So this is an example of really simple test that tests if function exists. Usually for your plugin, what you would need to test. Okay, as you can see here, we have an error right now. So, and our tests failed to run because it's trying to install our plugin, and basically it's exiting because it cannot find this function. It calls undefined function. So automatically it fails. So then let's try to check another test right here. This test is more complex. And what this does is testing basically REST API endpoints of our plugin. Inside in my plugin, I have, let me just close this. I have API endpoints here, as you can see right here. I registered them inside in this file. So basically these are like get endpoints and post endpoints. So you'll have a lot of this if you are working with some plugin, most likely. And so what this test does is basically testing this REST API endpoints. And what we are doing here is we are extending this class, which is a special class for specifically for WordPress REST API. And here in the beginning, this function runs when everything starts, the initial setup when our test runs. So here we are creating some admin user with role administrator. Then we start our REST API server. And then this function runs, this teardown runs when our tests finish, basically. And then these are the actual tests here. So let's check this one. So what this test does, it tests that all free routes required by the plugin are registered. So test required test routes are registered. So what it does, it gets all our routes, right, our REST API endpoints. We define them here inside an array, and basically we just loop them through this array and checks that our routes in our actual REST server has these routes registered, right? So this is a really simple test, just test that these routes are registered. And what we can see here, let's try to go in this REST API. So we are testing, for example, that library settings are registered. So if we go here, and we can see right here, this library settings. So I can try to comment it for this this time, and then let me try to run these tests once again with our command here, and let's see what will be the result. Let me close this. So every time that you run tests, wp-env basically it installs default like WordPress. It mounts your plugin inside, and then it runs tests against this plugin, and it always recreates new fresh database. So as you can see, now we are getting 4 failures, right? So we are getting routes registered, so we are failing this test. Then we are failing other tests that are testing these endpoints, right? So if we go back here, and then so we are failing this test, right? So here it shows like first test. Then the second test, protected endpoint rejects unauthenticated request. So it's like second test that we are running right here. So what this test does is basically we are trying to access this endpoint with a default user, with a user that is not an admin, right, basically. So here we are setting user to 0, so it's not our admin anymore. And then as we are expecting, we should receive 401, which is basically forbidden or not allowed. And instead we are receiving 404. As you can see here in our console, we can see 404 because this route is not even exist. So when we are trying to reach this route, this endpoint, right, so it doesn't even exist because I commented it. So that's the purpose of these tests, right? So we are basically checking that everything all the REST API routes, endpoints are registered, and then we cannot access them, or we can access them with specific permissions, right? And as you can see, we are failing 4 tests, right? So the next test also tests, again, the same endpoint here. And this time it's trying to access with a user who has a different role subscriber instead of administrator. So which should also give us 403 that access denied, basically, and we should not allow user with this role to access this route. And as you can see, our tests are working here, right? We are returning, we are having 404 this time because this endpoints does not even exist. So that is the point. That's the main idea of unit test. Another thing, so this is basically an example for really simple tests for REST API endpoints. Additionally, what you can do is that you can test for, so when you develop in a feature, for example, right, you want to add like a new screen, right, new page for your plugin. You can test that this page is accessible, that is loaded. Then on this page, for example, we have something like a list of post types. So what we can test that these post types are custom post type is registered, and then these custom post type are actually printed on this page. And for this, we can use browser tests, which you can use Playwright for this, but this is a probably topic for another video. So in this video, I wanted to demonstrate to you how to run PHP Unit tests. This they call integration tests, basically, and how to test your like REST API endpoints and some simple functions, because the front-end tests and JavaScript tests are slightly different, right? So if I scroll down here, you can see what else we are testing here. So here we are testing, for example, that this endpoint should return some kind of data. So this is our endpoint that should show some activity, basically what user opened last time, and then it should show some kind of activity, and then it should return 200. And we are testing that it returns 200. So it should return that status OK. The next, what we are testing is that settings that are stored. So this is where we are testing actually our post request, right? Because we are running this test server creatable. So this is our post request. So this is when we are saving something. And we are trying to save basically some settings here, right here with this state. We are trying to save it into this endpoint right here. And we are asserting, right, we are expecting that we should receive OK status, that we should get something back. And then we also are testing that this data that we get back is the same with data that we have in our database. So this is another useful test right here. The next, we are testing that this test is testing this endpoint that our block markup is validated. Again, very useful test. The next, we are testing that again with a user that is not admin, right? We are trying to save something. We are trying to run against this endpoint, and we again should get some kind of error right here. So these are just examples. So like onboarding complete, for example, if user completed onboarding. So we are testing like what's saved in the database. Are the screens, are the function exist? Are these endpoints are accessible? Because if you are going to add some features into your plugin, so for example, let me go into my admin, let me open the plugin here, my admin page. For example, assuming that I added these site settings, this screen here, and then I added these fields. Assuming that I added all of this, I want to write tests for this to make sure that these are saved in the database, and then the data that's saved there is returned properly with no errors. So what we are testing usually with our test is that we are testing happy path, that when everything goes right, and then there is also this like bad path when something goes like something fails. For example, we can try to say I don't know, like for example, we can try to save some data that is not allowed here. So for example, this should be a string here, but then user enters, then we enter something else and validation fails. We can try to test this one. And so whenever we add some kind of feature in our admin, in our plugin, we can write test for this, and eventually our tests here will grow. So we'll have to categorize them into like subfolders for specific features. For example, if I have onboarding for my plugin, I would just probably create a separate folder for this onboarding, and I will test that everything is working as expected. So these fields are populated properly. Then if we go on the next step, so as you can see here, I'm landing on the next step. So my screen here is updating. So since this is a React application, as you can see, if I click in here, my URL is not changing, right? Because in my case, I have basically React code here that is updating right here. And for this, I cannot use my PHP tests. And for this, I would need to write browser tests or jest tests or playwright tests. And basically, I would just imitate the user, land on this page, click this button, and then something is loaded, and then they click button next, and then something is saved. So I would be testing this one. But for your PHP functions, like your routes, for example, whenever user clicks something here, it's sending request to these endpoints, right, that I have registered in my API. And again, these tests, they are testing basically, we are testing that these endpoints are returning valid data, and they are basically all working as expected. So that's the point of this video, is the point of this test. So let's try to check again what's going on here. Let's try to run test again. And eventually your tests will grow, you'll have more and more. And what additionally, why is this useful is that we can hook all of this into our CI/CD pipeline. So whenever we push our changes to, let's say, GitHub, we can test in our CI pipeline, we can test that we can run the tests basically inside. So whenever you finish some feature locally, once we push this feature to our, let's say, to our repository where we work with our team members, these tests, they can run also inside, basically in our GitHub, using this, for example, GitHub workflow. And that is another useful thing about unit tests. So just to quickly recap, what are the steps? First, make sure that you have Docker Desktop installed, your Node.js, npm Composer, and you have plugin, obviously, and then install wp-env globally using npm. and then you can create wp-env.json, basic config. Then you start environment. Then make sure that you install these composer packages, PHP Unit, PHP Unit polyfills, and we don't need this one. This one is, I'll just delete it right here. Yeah, only this. Basically, only these plugins, packages. Okay. Then you can bootstrap using this command wp scaffold plugins tests. But to do this, what we can do is to run this command, so it will run inside in our CLI container in our Docker, right? This is the command, and then it will create these files for you, which you can edit right here in our editor. So let's open it again. Your config for your PHP unit, then your tests. Here we can write some tests. So let's open the simple test. We create tests, and then the last step is we run them using this command wp-env test-cli, pass to our plugin, and then the actual command to run tests, and just add it inside in your script, so it will give you this clean shortcut, basically. So you can run it like this: npm run test integration. So additionally, what you will eventually do is you'll add something like test JavaScript or jest, and then you would run something like jest tests right here. And then what you would do is probably you would combine all of this into one single command that will run multiple tests at the same time. So like this, for example. So that's it for this video. Hope you find it helpful. Let me know in comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.